where do you want to go next? We have some future stuff, but you also had a spectator sports thing. So do you want to stay there and then go to the future stuff?
Yeah, because I think I can try to tie the spectator stuff into football to still
Okay.
make the transition
Okay.
about the other stuff.
Perfect. Go ahead.
So last week, right? The
Yep.
last men's home basketball game. The coach was complaining, "Hey, wait, our fans aren't loud enough. Our fans aren't making enough noise. Like they're not supporting us." I mean, okay, yes. Again, and it came up in my class with my students, him talking about that, like and I get it, but you won. The fans were as much there. Like I guess I don't know. It's a chicken and egg thing for me, and maybe that's where I want to go with Penn State basketball. It feels like a chicken and egg thing. Are they going to win before I support you, or do you want me to support you? Because there's a lot of Lucy and Charlie Brown with that team's lack of success through the years, where people like start to buy in, and then oops, it doesn't happen. Like I think Penn State basketball fans probably have a little bit of PTSD. Like they're afraid to like jump on the bandwagon too soon. But at the same time, if they're there, and I don't know how much they're supposed to drive the action. Like, are they supposed to be crazed, loud the whole game? And it brought to mind the wrestling thing from last year. That poor kid that Kale threw under the bus because he said we are, and everybody responded Penn State, which was that kid's best day ever. And Kale's like, well, if you can hear an 8-year-old cheering for us in the stands, and he's the only voice, that's not good. So I don't know. Like I don't understand fully what's my responsibility as a spectator at an event. And this weekend, stadium will not probably be as full as it has been at other times. Crowd could be a little more dopey. I don't know.
Is is the Penn State I think there's several factors at play. I don't know if there's several issues at play. Is the Penn State basketball problem the fact that there's PTSD, which I agree with as somebody with that PTSD, or is the Penn State basketball problem the fact that it's just not a great environment, and they have an opportunity to build another environment, kind of like what Alex said. Like, and we talked about this before, and I don't want this to turn into like play games at Rec Hall segment, but that's what it's going to turn into. And I think the PTSD thing is very true, and I don't know that Mike Rhoades necessarily understands that. I also don't know that it's necessarily fair to him to conflate that of Pat
Right.
Chambers era and maybe even Micah Shrewsbury just up and leaving era onto him, because I think he's building a different, unique thing. But I think in some ways there are things that they could do to control that, or help build that, or force that. And I think it's more so not necessarily a crowd volume, it's a crowd density situation. And I think, I don't know, I think until Big Ten season comes around, like right now in football season, everybody's on football. Like that's what we're going to spend most of this podcast with. What we spent most of this podcast talking about. There's a reason we don't do basketball previews. We do football previews. You know what I'm saying? And I think that kind of goes back to that issue. The other thing I will say that I do probably struggle with that logic a little bit, or is in the face of that logic. I wrote down the word baseball in mine because Penn State baseball has given reason people to care, and I think I've always said that if you give Penn Staters a reason to care, they will show up, but you have to give them a reason to care. Football is enough of its own reason. Is that a messed up mentality? Maybe, but not everybody's going to be a perfect fan in our dream world.
Yeah, and I think whether it's PTSD, there's a lot of Missouri and Penn State fans too. Like, show me first, right? And
Yeah.
just now baseball, I might quibble with. Did they give them a reason to care? Or did they give them a reason to eat hot dogs?
Well, but there's a reason to care. That's a reason to
Okay,
care.
okay.
Why aren't they doing it at the BJC? You know what I'm saying?
Well, and I think the Rec Hall thing. Forget bigger picture because again, if they have the money to try to do something separate someday down the road, God bless them. But go ahead and make your return to rec game or one of two return to rec games the Wednesday before Thanksgiving break when students are leaving, right? Like
Right.
that's when this game was last week. It was last Wednesday. Some students are getting out of Dodge. It's going to be a sleepy night. Go ahead and address the density by playing that game as a return to. Again, it's non-conference, so maybe nobody cares. But I don't know. I think there are probably different ways that you can battle that without saying, "Oh, our atmosphere is great." I just don't think you can. And I'm not saying he was blaming the fans, but he was.
Mm-mm.
You could see, it's not that far of a leap, right? Like, and I just don't think you can ever do that. Like, I think it's always got to be, "Hey, we're thrilled who's here. Hope they could be a little louder." I mean, I think he handled it well,
Yeah.
but there's just there's so many factors, right? Is it on TV? Is it all those things, right? That you just want to try to get rid of as many of those as possible. And it's just interesting to me on the heels of Kale last year, right? There was that coming into football this weekend, which could be interesting. And then on the other side, Katie Schumacher Shawley, they're home with, was it Purdue, right?
Yeah.
And raving about the crowd they had. So it's kind of, so I guess what's the difference between women's volleyball and men's basketball?
See, and that is where I don't understand things, because I think that's also like you could actually put wrestling into the women's volleyball side of that, because niche sport, people really are passionate about Penn State women's volleyball. People are really passionate about Penn State wrestling. Penn State basketball, the number 2 revenue generator for the school's athletics program. And I struggle with that. Like I do struggle. I don't understand that. I don't understand the why there. I guess the only other thing I would say, like going back to what you were saying, is like the grumbling. You have an opportunity to build something both with your results on the court, and I think Mike Rhoades is building something on the results on the court. But I think going back to the Rec Hall thing, like you have a legitimate option on campus to do something about this. Like I can't imagine that they're getting that many, like they're going to lose out on that much money if they played 10 games at Rec Hall. Like there were not that many people there last Wednesday night. It's probably maybe even cheaper for them to set up and play in Rec Hall and have less staff there. And I just think
it would be interesting to
creating
know.
There you could create an environment, right? Like you can create, people are on top of you. It's louder. It's more intense. It's yeah. So no, I see what you're getting at there though. Like,
but I don't know what, like, you have fewer concessions, right? You're not selling beer in Rec Hall. And I don't know if that makes a difference, right? Like, I don't know if 10 games of beer sales is what? Like, what's it worth? 10 games of average game, not well-attended game beer sales or food, does it make a difference? Like, I don't know.
Are they selling beer for wrestling or anything at Rec Hall? Do they have a license?
I don't think at Rec Hall. I think if they're in the Jordan Center, yes, in Rec Hall, not yet. Because I wasn't there for the opener, so I don't know.
Okay. Something to keep in mind. No, I don't know. And maybe it's a sports thing. Maybe I've overconflated how important the sport of basketball is, and volleyball is more important in this state, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. Because I don't even think it's a state issue. I think it's a community issue, right? Like it's a center region issue, because you're not going to drive unless it's a weekend game from Philly or Lancaster or York or wherever.
And the media used to make it an athletic department thing. Like, I think the media under previous regimes would say they cared more. Well, they wouldn't say this, but it's clear that they did care more about the basketball program than the athletic department.
They did.
Ways, right?
They
right,
did.
what I'm saying. And I don't think that's the case anymore, right? Like, I think that used to be something you could make an argument for. I think they care. I think it's a learning process. And I think you're right about, the past problems shouldn't be part of Coach Rhoades' situation, but the context probably matters for him to know.
Yeah.
Right? Just to give that sense. It's kind of like we talked a few weeks ago now about, James Franklin knowing historic games in Penn State history. Oh, it was a game at Illinois sometime when they lost and came back, and there was something about that. Like, he should know that chapter and verse. And Rhoades should probably know that PTSD exists in it. And it might go back more than just a couple coaches, right? It's like they used to complain years ago when they first got in the Jordan Center. Oh, well, it's going to rain tonight, so that's going to cut down the crowd. Oh, it's going to snow tonight. Like, staffers would legitimately talk about, we got our Saturday game, but it's snowing.
Right.
That's just Penn State basketball. Like, that was the mindset not all that long ago. So it's good that the mindset's changing.